Hey y'all, it's Ashley at BookishRealm, and you know, quite often I kind of ask, like, why do I keep introducing myself in these videos? But then I kind of think, you know, everybody who watches my videos is not necessarily a subscriber, so it is a way for me to introduce myself, say the channel name, so you're kind of getting to know a little bit about who I am, although it's not a lot, but it's a little something, my name and channel name. So as you can see from the title of this video, we are here today to discuss a little bit about the whole concept of arcs. And as always, I like to preface this conversation by saying that this is not a call out video. This is not an attack on anyone. This is a video that I want to do, or a series that I've been wanting to do, to generate more conversations within the community. And the reason why I'm doing this is because on Monday nights I used to do live shows and sprints. We now call them a dash of sprints, not complete sprints. But we used to have these conversations on Mondays just about different topics, and it's been a little bit harder for me to do the live shows on Monday nights because my schedule is just really crazy right now. So it's just been easier for me to kind of change that whole conversation and move it into video form. I will always say too that this is a way for us to have open dialogue. Everyone is not going to necessarily agree. I try to look at it from both sides. I always insert myself into the conversation because I do like to call myself out a little bit on things that I've seen like myself do that are closely related to the topics. Like when we were talking about booktube's obsession with numbers, I was saying that even myself, I had put a strong emphasis on the number of books that I was reading each month, and that I felt like I was kind of part of the problem when we're discussing things like that and how we influence each other within the community. And it's going to be the same in this discussion. I'm going to kind of make this one a little bit more personal and like my journey of how I have perceived arcs. I am not going to be rehashing the situation that happened with NetGalley. I believe that Jess Owens covered that efficiently, so that's not what I'm going to cover. I also am not going to specifically go into the whole concept of reviewing and monetary compensation. I think that that is an important discussion that should happen. However, I did not want to include it in this because, as you can see from the title, the one word that I have included, and I have included it for very intentional purposes, is the word elitism. And because I want to focus on these two things together, I didn't want to bring in the whole concept of monetary compensation. Now, if that's something that we want to talk about, definitely let me know in the comment box below. What is an arc? I think if you're involved in the book community, I think most people have a kind of a basic understanding of what an arc is. If you don't, they are advanced readers copies, or I've seen advanced review copy of books that have yet to be published. They're sent out, or they can be requested through websites like NetGalley, and is it Edelweiss? Somebody please give me the correct pronunciation of that site because I struggle with it so much, and I don't know if I've ever found the right way to say it yet, but please correct me if I'm absolutely wrong in saying that. But you can request them from places like that where you will either get approved or denied, and then you'll get access to a digital copy. Sometimes arcs are sent out unsolicited depending upon how a publishing company and their imprint wants to do stuff. It is, I don't even really know exactly how you get selected for unsolicited stuff. I think that sometimes if you review something and they may like the review and you're already on the mailing list, they will send you stuff that they feel like closely aligns with other stuff that you've already reviewed. So there's also situations where publishers will reach out to people and ask them if they would be willing to do a review of certain copies, or if they would be, you know, interested in certain copies, and then they will send them out to people for review. So the reason why I included the word elitism is because I have had conversations with people in the community, and I think sometimes arcs, when they're not requested from NetGalley or Edelweiss, excuse me again if I'm saying that wrong, I think sometimes having arcs, getting promotional boxes, generates some interesting feelings in the community, whether we want to admit it or not. And I think that sometimes having a promotional box or having an arc of a highly anticipated read can come off as being a part of the elite. And it's a very tricky conversation to have, because you don't want to say that people who are receiving these things are at fault, or that they're part of elite group, or that they're intentionally showboating, because when you get sent this stuff, it is promotional. So sharing it via social media is sometimes part of the gig. So it's kind of tricky. It is very, very tricky. But I also have heard people feel like it almost becomes this feeling that when you receive ARCs, especially promotional boxes, unsolicited, or you know, you're receiving finished copies of stuff that you didn't necessarily ask for, you are in the upper echelon of booktube. Now, once again, I'm gonna go ahead and say, people who receive this stuff, that does not mean that that's the way that they carry themselves. This is not the way that they feel. This is not how they necessarily come off. But I can see how sometimes those feelings can get generated amongst people. I also think it's a good conversation to have in how much people feel like receiving ARCs is like the end all be all when it comes to being a booktuber. Like, once you start receiving unsolicited ARCs, or you get these promotional boxes, or you get certain things, that means that you've made it. Which is absolutely crazy. But I feel the sentiment. I understand that, because I don't think I genuinely knew what an ARC was until maybe 2016. I remember I was in the booktube community as early as 2014. Are those videos still up? Absolutely not. I cleaned out I cleaned out my videos. A lot of those are privated, because my goodness gracious, baby version of me was a very interesting human. I think that I did not realize their intention or their purpose until then, because I was following a couple of bigger booktubers and they were receiving ARCs and all types of stuff, and I was like, oh, what's that? And I saw that they were getting early release copies of stuff that I was interested in that hadn't been released, and I was like, I want to get my hands on stuff like that. Like, I want to be a cool kid. And I think the first time that I actually received an ARC was at YALLFest, and that was around 2016, 2017 was like the first time that I went to YALLFest. YALLFest is a book festival that happens in Charleston, South Carolina every year. Of course, because of COVID, it has not happened for the past year. It didn't happen in 2020. Don't know if it's going to happen this year. I think everything is contingent upon, you know, the pandemic. So very, very interesting experience in getting these ARCs and feeling like, you know, getting an ARC just made you feel good. It's a good feeling. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's probably very, very strange, but I do remember an experience where they were giving out only 30 copies of the ARCs of The Cruel Prince, and it was a fight for those 30 ARCs. It was, people were getting nasty with each other, people were cursing each other out, and it was so amazing to watch that happen and seeing that go down, which is why I wanted to kind of have this conversation adjacent to a lot of the other conversations that I've been having with some people in the community. Now, I think that in having this conversation, it's also important to know, like, what is the purpose of the ARC, or what is the purpose of an ARC? Because ARC copies, if you did not know, I'll show you an example of one. This is one that I just received. This is one that I think I received unsolicited, but it is one that I am interested in reading. And usually on the inside cover or on the back of the book, what they'll do is they'll tell you exactly what the intention is behind having these advanced readers copies out. And this one had a major year-long publicity and marketing campaign, and it tells you exactly what their intentions were and where some of these ARCs were getting sent. And sometimes I wonder if we kind of forget the purpose of those ARCs, and if we get caught up in getting ARCs because we feel like that's the end-all be-all, and that is what makes us top tier an elite booktuber, if we are able to begin receiving ARCs and publishing packages and all types of stuff like that. If we get caught up in the hoopla of it all, and then we don't review any of the books that are ARC copies. Now, am I saying that sometimes we just get busy and it happens? Yeah, of course. I'm currently behind on reviews because life. We're not full-time reviewers, to my knowledge. I know most people that I know in the community are not full-time reviewers. I am definitely not a full-time reviewer. Most of us have part-time or full-time jobs outside of this. Most of us are in school. So it's not a full-time gig. None of us really honestly do this full-time. that I know of. Even big booktubers I know still have full-time jobs, part-time jobs, or in school or whatever. You know, it's not something that we do 100% of our time. And life happens. So is it possible to receive review copies that you have the best intention of getting to and life gets in the way? Absolutely, it happens all the time. But is there also this balance of, I feel like this is what's going to classify me as a top tier booktuber or a bookstagrammer, and I request a request and then you don't review any of it? Does that happen? It absolutely does. And I think tying it into elitism is that conversation of, are you requesting to review? Are you requesting to help campaign? Are you requesting because you want to show these things off? And once again, I always say, this is not to point any fingers at anyone, because all of us have done it, y'all. I have review copies that I have received that I have not touched, and not unsolicited, and I will hold myself accountable for that. Books that I have requested, and say it again, that I have not reviewed. I think sometimes we can all be guilty of it. Is everyone guilty of it? No, but I'm gonna say that I'm guilty of it because it's the truth. And sometimes you can get caught up in saying, oh my gosh, look, I got the latest book that's about to come out in like 2 or 3 months, and then you don't read it. So in that sense, it's like, well, what was the purpose of requesting it if you weren't going to ever read the book? And then it goes back to the conversation of, well, what's the purpose of an advanced review copy? Are we doing it because we were helping to generate buzz? It's materials that we're really interested in and we want to be a part of these campaigning things, or are we just, you know, we just wanting to kind of show the book off? I want to continue to say that it happens. It's something that we need to acknowledge, and it once again is something that we need to think about when we talk about booktube culture. What are the trends that we as a community start to create? What are the things that we do as a community that influence those who are newer to joining the community? Because I think sometimes if, you know, we place this emphasis on art copies and you have to do this and do that, and the ultimate goal is to receive X, Y, and Z, what message is that sending to new people who are coming into the community? Now, I know a lot of people in this community who are like hardcore reviewers. I mean, like really hardcore reviewers, and they request ARCs because they are a part of the culture in which they like to, you know, provide their followers or their viewers with honest opinions about books that are coming out. They want to make sure that they are giving their viewers who trust them sound advice on whether to check this book out, or maybe, you know, you might want to consider a few things if you're interested in this book. And I know a lot of people like that. I know quite a few people who request and they stay ahead of the game, and every month they set goals to make sure they're getting through their art copies. They're making sure that when they request things that they get through them. If they're sent things from a publisher that they want to review, they make sure they review those materials. So there are people in the community who are very much so interested in the reviewing aspect, the campaigning aspect, the giving their honest opinions to help their followers and their viewers navigate the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, when we say thousands and thousands and thousands of books that are published every single year. Now, I think we also have to take into consideration what someone's purpose is in the community, which is what I always go back to. I think if there's anything that I've learned in the time that I've been on BookTube is learning your purpose here, because once you learn your purpose and what role you want to play in this community, I think you become a lot more comfortable in what you do on your channel, what you do on Bookstagram. Everything begins to feel like a more natural process. And I'm speaking specifically for me because that's the process that I've had to go through. I just came to the conclusion that for me, I think reviewing is what I like to do. I like talking about books. I like kind of giving my perspective and letting you all know, like, you definitely should check this book out, or, you know, I would be a little hesitant or weary of checking this book out. I mean, go for it if you're really interested, but this, you know, this didn't necessarily work for me as a reader. And I think that that for me is very, very important. But I know that that's not everybody's goal. Not everybody wants to be a reviewer. Not everyone wants to engage in dialogue about their books, and that is their right to make that decision. Think that a lot of people are just here for the community aspect. They like making videos, they like talking about books, but they may not want that responsibility, and I don't blame them, because when you start to get into the world of like deep reviewing and working with publishers and reading materials, it can get kind of like, it's a lot. It becomes a lot. And I would be a liar if I sat here and told you that when you get into the process of getting emails with publishers asking you for stuff and you're requesting copies and you're doing this and you have to promote this, you have to promote that, that it's easy. I'm not going to say that. It takes time. It's a lot of like scheduling and working around what may be your other responsibilities, whether that's school, work, parent, partnership, you know, family obligations, whatever. It is a lot to navigate. And I respect people who say, like, you know, that's just not me. I'm just not here for that. Then that is their decision to make, and they should be respected for that decision. But I know that that is going to then trigger the conversation. If you're not interested in reviewing, should you be receiving advanced review copies? But I think publishing itself may be changing the narrative around advanced review copies. Sometimes I feel like there are books that are received because they just want promotional purposes, because they know that you have a certain engagement or a certain following, and they just want you to show the book. That is a thing now too. So there are people who receive finished copies or advanced review copies, and there is no agreement of a review. It simply is, can you showcase this book on your channel? You don't have to review it. We're not asking you to put a review on Amazon or Goodreads or anything like that. It's different. And I know it is a very nuanced conversation too when we get down to like, well, what if you request? I think the rules for that are kind of sticky, because when you start requesting books, that means that you have actively wanted to review this book. I think that conversation, honestly, it's a little different. It's a different thing. It's a different transaction as opposed to receiving something just for promotional purposes or receiving something that's unsolicited. It's a very tough area to navigate, but I think for me is one of the most important things is changing the culture around receiving ARCs. I think that, and it could just be me, this is why I always open up these videos for conversation. Like, do you feel like there is a certain level of elitism that is associated with receiving ARCs? I have heard other people say that there is, but I haven't talked to a wide variety of individuals. So, you know, I could be saying there is, and I'm talking about a small population of people, and y'all can get in the comments and be like, actually, there is no elitism associated with ARCs. You're completely seeing things absolutely wrong, which is fine. It is perfectly fine. It's great to have conversation. It's great to have discourse in a respectful way and say, like, you know, I just respectfully disagree. I don't agree with that. And that's fine too. But I wonder, is there an air of elitism that is surrounding the receiving of ARCs? Is there an air of elitism surrounding the receivement of promotional boxes? I know someone who is very hesitant to post that they received the promotional box surrounding Concrete Rose because people were going to say something to them about it. And people were going to get upset, and people were going to be in their feelings about it. And I think that happens. I think when something is highly marketed to the point that it is super hyped and everybody wants to get their hands on it, when a certain group of us only get it, it does create some type of feelings. I think it genuinely does. And I think it creates certain feelings when people receive this stuff and then they don't end up reviewing it. But then you don't know the agreement that's behind receiving that stuff, because there may be no clause for reviewing it. And I think being a little bit more transparent about it is super important, because every book that and I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for anyone else's because I'm not in anybody else's emails, but I can speak for my emails. Every book that I receive is not a book for review, meaning that I can get something sent to me and it literally is for promotional purposes, meaning that if we send you this book, you know, can you just share it on your channel? And it's not even like, hey, can you review this book? It's just like, we're just trying to get the word out about this book, and that's it. I do get emails where it's specifically like, hey, we like your reviews. We were wondering if you could pick up this book and review it for us. And then it becomes a, well, how soon do you need it reviewed? Because I have a backlog of stuff. It becomes a situation where it's like, I would love to, but not right now. You know, I think it's a lot more complex. And I think that sometimes if those of us on the other side were a little bit transparent about it, I think it would add some clarification about it. And then, you know, you can throw in receiving materials from indie authors. That's a whole different ballgame. That's a whole different thing to navigate, and a new experience as well. And I wonder if we kind of don't put as much emphasis on indie authors because they're not as big, or sometimes I know emphasis is not put on indie authors sometimes because they're independently published and they don't necessarily always have the financial backing that these major publishers do. So being critical with them is a little bit more tricky place to, it's a more tricky place to navigate sometimes when you think about it, which is, I know some people who are like, I limit how many indie people I am willing to take on. I'm the same way. I get a lot of emails every week, you know, can you review this, can you review that? And I have to say at some point, I can't. Like, I just can't do that. I just don't have the capacity to do that, and I am only going to take what I'm interested in, and then I'm only going to take a certain number, and then, you know, I'm very mindful of how I review indie authors and their works because it gets very, very tricky with that. I guess all of this to really say, at the end of the day, what should the culture around ARCs look like? What would be the ideal situation for you as a viewer, as a part of this community, as a, you know, a booktuber yourself, or maybe you're a bookstagrammer, or maybe you're a reviewer? What would you like to see the culture surrounding ARCs be about? Should we be more transparent? Should we have more dialogue about this? Do you feel like sometimes you have to work to achieve to getting ARCs? Do you feel like that is the end goal? And not necessarily end goal, but do you feel like you've made it? You've made it once you've gotten this ARC. And it's kind of, it's fascinating. It's tricky. I know people who really do request and want to do what they can to help out their favorite authors, or, you know, read their most anticipated books and generate conversations and share just in the love of that author, or the love of possibly getting their hands on this book that they're excited to see. But, you know, what do we do in situations where we request and we don't review? You know, what type of picture does that paint? So I don't know. I think it's something that I'm still trying to navigate and balance out myself. You know, I like to share things that I have received, and a lot of times it is nice to thank, you know, the publisher or the author, whoever, for sending you stuff publicly on social media, because it's just a nice thing to do. But sometimes it can get kind of it can get to be a lot. It really can. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all and say that it's not. And I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh yeah, you know, but I don't want it to seem like I didn't choose I didn't choose to take the path of wanting to review. I don't want it to seem that way, because that's not true either. I did make that decision. I think for me personally, it's about learning how to balance and to get better at reviewing my stuff on time, which I think sometimes a lot of us struggle with that, because once again, life happens. We're humans. Things happen that are out of our control. Sometimes we have other responsibilities, and we have the best intentions, and sometimes it doesn't help, and sometimes things just don't work out in our favor. But I think for me, just learning how to balance and learning how to say no has been a huge thing for me, and not getting caught up in the culture of, oh, I have to have this because it's the latest thing. I have to have this because everybody's talking about it. I have to have this because it's the buzz, and I know that, you know, this is going to be a cool thing to show everybody. I have to get out of that mentality. And I'm not going to lie and say that I haven't been part of that mentality, that I haven't been this human that has made the mistake of saying like, oh, I just want to get this art to show like I got this art, because I've done it. And I would be foolish and a liar to sit here and say that I haven't done it. So how do we get out of that mentality? How do we find that balance? How do we have this conversation about, you know, wanting to genuinely create buzz and show books to the community and review books for the community without it coming off as a elitist act? Because I'm sure there are people who viewed some stuff that I showed on my channel or I've talked about an arc that I've received, and it's like, oh, you know, like, you are just talking about this book because you want to show that you have status in this community. I'm sure that that has happened, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it hasn't happened, because life, humans, I get it. I really do. But how do we get away from that culture? Because arcs are a good thing. They're a great way to help some of our favorite authors, or help generate buzz about books that deserve more attention. I know some really great bloggers who do amazing work with requesting arcs and trying to get as much buzz out about these books and help out these authors and publishers as much as they can. Like, how do we bring the focus back to that instead of, hey, look what I got? It happens. It's not an attack on anybody. I just said, like, I'm guilty of it. But sometimes it can be like, no, look what I have and you don't. Like, it does happen, and I think it's human for those things to happen. But how do we change and stop those things from happening? So let me know in the comment box below. As always, I hope I've come across in a clear and concise way. This all is usually stream of consciousness. I don't script these out. I just have no intention of scripting these out. I don't have time to script these out. It's not to say that I don't think about these things before I sit down and talk about them, but I don't script myself out word for word. So I hope that was clear and concise as possible. Let me know in the comment box below your thoughts and how you're feeling, whether you agree or you disagree. Let's just have another conversation. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications. If you're looking to support the channel, links are down in the description box below. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media, those links will be down in the box below. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, whatever time of day you're watching this.